Hi, good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me here today. And I'm here just to introduce our next speaker, Brooke Loughrin. I was fortunate enough to meet Brooke as a freshman at Boston College. And as members of the Presidential Scholars Program, I was able to get to spend a lot of time with her. And not only did she stand out due to her impressive accomplishments, but standing at 6 feet tall with a full head of shockingly blonde hair, she stands out literally as well. With that said, I was able to really get to know her better during the past 2.5 years that we've been at BC. And I've been consistently blown away by all the wonderful things that she's been able to accomplish, be it in academics, extracurriculars, or career-related pursuits. Even today, she continues to amaze me with her passion, her sincerity, and her thoughtfulness towards everything that she does and everyone that she meets. Thus, it is probably an understatement to say that Brooke is definitely a woman that I admire deeply. To illustrate my point, she's quite the globetrotter, and she has studied abroad in multiple countries such as India, Iran, Tajikistan, and Senegal. And in recognition of her accomplishments and extensive experience abroad, Brooke was recently named the first ever U.S. youth delegate to the UN this past September, actually. And this makes her the first young person ever to join the U.S. delegate in the UN. So without further ado, please, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together to help me welcome Brooke to the stage.
That's quite a song for an entrance. Good afternoon. It's really a pleasure to be here with you all today, celebrating women we admire. I would like to especially thank the Ad Club for inviting me to speak at this event, and also to the event sponsors for helping to make this gathering of inspiring women possible. When I first heard about the theme of today's event, I couldn't help but start to reflect on the women I admire. Women who have had a tremendous impact on my life, both as trailblazers in the fields I'm most passionate about, international development and diplomacy, and as trusted and cherished friends, mentors, and advisors. Recognizing that no country can realize its potential if half its population can't reach theirs, as we've all become familiar with from New York Times journalist Nicholas Kristof, these women have taken on the challenge of breaking down barriers to women's political, economic, and social empowerment around the world. While the world has seen important progress in expanding opportunities for women and girls, significant gaps remain in the areas of political participation and economic opportunity. Yet, as many of you are familiar with, a growing body of evidence shows that women's political and economic empowerment are critical to fostering international peace and security, growing vibrant market economies, and supporting open and accountable governance. Indeed, one of the women I admire the most in the world, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, has recently said that ensuring that women are equal partners is one of the greatest pieces of unfinished business in the 21st century. And I believe that many of us in this room hold that to be true very deeply. The first story that I would like to share with you today is about my earliest mentor in international development, Carol Chilios, the founder of the Fabric of Life Foundation. I first met Carol when I was 12 years old after reading an article about her in my local newspaper. And what you have to understand about this is that I'm from a very small town, so our news comes out once every 2 weeks, and this was on the front page. The article was about the Hergé Center, a microfinance and women's training center, which Carol had recently opened in Mali, West Africa. The mission of the Hergé Center is to break the cycle of begging, slavery, and prostitution on the streets of the capital city of Mali, Bamako, by offering business and educational opportunities to women and girls whose families have been bounded by the cycle of poverty for generations. The center is open for women and girls between the ages of 10 and 25, offering skills training, education, and a marketing cooperative to help girls and women from the streets learn skills to generate an income and become micro-entrepreneurs. Despite my young age, as I mentioned, 12 years old, and lack of concrete skills in the area of international development, Carol was willing to harness my creativity, passion, and enthusiasm that we so often find in young people to make me an integral part of the organization's operations and outreach in Seattle. I share this story with you to demonstrate the transformative role that we can all play and that we all do play in the lives of young women, and to urge you to make your work, whatever it may be, accessible to young people through mentorship and outreach. I remember after a few years of working with Carol, her sharing with me why she was willing to work with me at the young age of 12 years old. And she said, quoting a Malian writer, Amadou Hempate Ba, who had once stated that in Africa, an elder who dies is a library that burns. And in her case, she wasn't willing to let her abundance of knowledge and experience burn without sharing it with others. Now, moving to the next woman that I wanted to speak about, my host mother in India. One day during my sophomore year of high school, I arrived at the Fabric of Life Foundation, ready for a hard day's of work, only to be met with the most devastating news that I'd ever encountered during my work with the foundation, and frankly, throughout my entire life at that point. I was informed that the day before, one of the girls at the Heritage Center in Mali, Astan Traore, had died of malaria from bathing in a pool of still standing water. She had gone to visit an aunt who was sick, and since she was away from the center, she didn't have access to clean water. Of course, this incident is not uncommon. As we know in the developing world, the World Health Organization estimates that 4 in 5 incidents of human illness are a result of poor and insufficient water supply. But as a 14, 15-year-old, this was, as I mentioned, truly the most devastating news that I had ever heard. The Heritage Center had provided Astan with education, economic opportunity, food, security, and shelter, but when she was away from the center, she was not safe because she lacked access to clean water. In many ways, the death of Astan forced me to confront the fact that improving the lives of women and girls around the world requires addressing issues of water quality and scarcity and other health-related issues as much as it does women's education and economic empowerment. Therefore, in 2009, I took quite a leap of faith and decided to move to India for my junior year of high school, hoping to immerse myself in development projects in the southern Indian state of Andhra Pradesh. When I first arrived in India, I was overwhelmed by the pervasiveness of poverty on the streets of India and the complexities of the root causes of poverty in the world's most populous and chaotic democracy. My host mother, Indira Kurian, recognized that I was struggling severely with a lot of what I was witnessing, and so she decided that it would be a good idea to give me an opportunity where I felt like I could make a difference. So she suggested that every day after school I go home with the family's household help who lived in a slum 45 minutes outside of India, and tried to see what needs were in that community that I could potentially serve as a student. And so between my host mother and I, we set up an English school in the slum with about 70 students of a variety of different ages. And but again, when I was working with these students, I was confronted daily with how few of their basic needs were met and how much that impacted their ability to learn as students. India is, of course, an example of a country where water problems are both critical and complicated. In my host family's house, we lived on the 6th floor of an apartment building in which every tenant shared water that was collected on the roof during the monsoon season, which meant that if one family in the building used more than their share of water, others would have little to no water for a few days or even a week. I would challenge all of you to imagine what this would be like if your neighbors somehow used up all of your water and you couldn't shower for a few days or a week. During part of my year in India, I also started to live full-time with the children that I was working with in the slum, And in that case, we often had to walk 3 miles to a neighboring village to collect water. Of specific concern to many of you in this room, as we speak about women's issues, I think it's important to note how much, again, water scarcity impacts other development issues in countries like India, such as education, health, and women's rights. In particular, I noticed that the burden of finding water in countries like India often falls most heavily on women and girls. Girls in India are often denied an education because they are sent to fetch water, often spending 4 to 5 hours each day searching for water in often very dangerous conditions that very sadly occasionally lead to instances of rape and disappearance of young women and girls. Some of the girls I met who could attend school did not because they didn't have access to sanitary facilities in their school, or if they did, they were not safe and private, and so their parents had very legitimate concerns about the safety of their girls and decided that they wouldn't send them to school. So I think this is an important example because it demonstrates how even in cases where parents think that they would like to send their girls to school just as much as their boys, they do have very serious concerns about whether that is something that would be safe. In addition, domestic chores in India, as I became very accustomed to, require water, yet many women find less than half of what is considered a basic human right to drink, 5.5 gallons. As a woman, I could not imagine having to decide whether or not to give my children unsanitary water or no water at all. The images of the slum I taught English in while living in India come to mind whenever I take for granted the abundance of the water I consume every day, which I often do being from Seattle where it seems to rain every day. While I drank sanitary water from my water bottle while I was in India, the children I was teaching struggled to find clean water. On a constant basis, I worried about my students' well-being, and I often, even now, continue to fear that the lack of water is keeping them from an education and a future. Turning now to a very different challenge facing women, I would like to speak about the area which I know best, which is this situation of women in Iran. I was very fortunate a few years ago to travel on a United Nations delegation to Iran for a month to speak with young women and girls about their experiences and also to address some of the challenges that women face in the context of Iran. In 1983, 5 years after the Iranian Revolution, Iranian poet Samin Behbahani wrote a poem called Homage to Being, which to this day is still my favorite poem from a female poet, in which she calls for women's visibility, voice, and strength in the face of violence and oppression around the world. In this poem, she says, "Sing, gypsy, sing. In homage to being, you must sing. Let ears register your presence, eyes and throats burn from the smoke that trails the monsters as they soar in the sky. Scream if you can of the terrors of this night." The significance of this poem is that when Behbahani wrote this poem, women were forbidden to sing in public, and as many of you may know, they are still forbidden to sing in public, and were expected to endure, not to reflect upon their suffering. Behbahani's poetry inspires Shirin Ebadi's work, the next woman that I'm going to talk about, and many of the themes in Homage to Being are present in Ebadi's famous memoir, Iran Awakening. I was fortunate enough to meet with Ebadi a few years ago when she visited Harvard University, and many of these anecdotes are from my conversation with her. Ebadi has often claimed that written word is the most powerful tool that women have to protect themselves against the tyranny of oppression and tradition, and to transform their reality. Ebadi urges women to challenge culture's perceptions of women's roles by doing exactly what is not expected of them, especially in Iranian culture, recording and publishing written work and pursuing non-traditional women's careers as lawyers, judges, writers, and poets. One of the strengths of Ebadi's writing is that she acknowledges the fear which grips women when they question traditional norms. In Iran Awakening, Ebadi notes the fear experienced by women when they venture from their homes into the public domain. For women, public space became fraught with uncertainty. There was little one could do for protection against a state that simply wished to impose a climate of fear, a fear so pervasive that it would keep women at home, the place where traditional men believe they should be. She also describes her own fear that her work will put her children in danger. My greatest apprehension has always been that my daughters would be used to crush me. If they were ever picked up on some pretext or another, and it was discovered that they were my daughters, they would doubtlessly be treated much or more harshly. One of the central themes of Abadi's work is the limited power of women under the current system in Iran to prevent violence or to seek recourse for mistreatment. Abadi argues that Iranian women are treated effectively as non-people because of the regime's outrageous laws. As an example, she referenced, when I spoke to her, a legal code which holds that if a man suffers an injury that damages his testicles, he is entitled to compensation equal to a woman's life. Yes. Despite the challenges facing women who exert their existence in Iran, Abadi rejects the idea that to survive, women must stay submissive and silent. In Iran Awakening, for example, Abadi reveals that she reminds herself constantly not to be overcome by fear. She said to me, "The greatest threat of all is my own fear. That is our fear, the fear of Iranians who want a different future that makes our opponents powerful." In homage to being, Behbahani echoes Abadi through her encouragement of women to voice their existence for their own survival. Ages dark and ancient have pressed their weight against your body. Break out of their embrace, lest you stay a mere trace in a fossil. Gypsy, to stay alive, you must slay silence. I mean, to pay homage to being, you must sing. Both Behbahani and Abadi have paid homage to Iranian women and women around the world by committing their respective lifetimes to the fight for freedom of expression and women's rights in Iran and other countries in which women suffer under oppression. Abadi represents women in Iran and shares their cases with the international community. She has also accepted the price of protesting against the regime, and in her memoir, has expressed eloquently why she so often feels the urge to shout from the rooftops. Behbahani has given a voice to Iranian women by writing the previously unwritten and articulating the power of speaking out against oppression. When I was in Iran 3 years ago, I remember meeting a young girl who was inspired to become a poet because of her experiences meeting Behbahani and also reading her work. Behbahani and Abadi have sacrificed their own safety and comfort in order to create lasting change by refusing to leave their country and to fight for women's rights from within. After reading their poetry, when I think of Iran, I will think of their strength and courage in the face of a brutal regime. In one of her poems, "Stop Throwing My Country to the Wind," Behbahani accurately, if not accidentally, describes the influence of women writers in the Iranian reform movement. "You may wish to have me burn or decide to stone me," she says, "but in your hand, match or stone will lose their power to harm me." In this line, Behbahani reminds us that she has secured her own survival by slaying the silence on women's issues and sharing her poetry, which celebrates women around the world. In part because of the work of women like Behbahani and Abadi, Iranian women are negotiating and redefining their roles in Iranian society and making it known that they will not stop until their equality and their rights are recognized by the Iranian government. And now I would like to turn to speak briefly about a number of women that have influenced my work in diplomacy as a U.S. youth delegate to the UN. First, I would like to talk briefly about U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Susan Rice, who was actually the person that selected me to participate in this role. And I think one thing that we've seen in terms of transformation at the State Department over the past decade, and especially under Secretary Hillary Clinton, has been the expansion of roles for women within leadership of the State Department. Susan Rice is a perfect example of this, but of course there are others, such as Assistant Secretary of State Esther Brimmer, who is the person that I work most closely with in my role as the U.S. Youth Delegate. Also, for the first time, the Special Advisor to the Secretary of State on Global Youth Issues is a woman, Zinat Rahman, and many of you may be familiar with her work, for those of you that work on youth civic participation and activism. I would like to end my remarks today by sharing with you an excerpt from a speech given by former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton at the Equal Futures Partnership launch in September of last year. In her speech, Secretary Clinton said that ensuring that women are equal partners, as they should be, and are free to realize their own God-given potential is one of the greatest pieces of unfinished business of the 21st century, which is the part that I quoted earlier. And she goes on to say, if we want to support strong democracies, thriving economies, and stable and peaceful societies worldwide, we must support women and girls. Secretary Clinton helped launch the Equal Futures Partnership on behalf of the United States, along with 12 other founding countries: Australia, Benin, Bangladesh, Denmark, Finland, Indonesia, Jordan, the Netherlands, Peru, Senegal, and Tunisia, as well as the European Union. The goal of the Equal Futures Partnership is for women to participate fully in public life and to lead and benefit from inclusive economic growth. As a founding member of the Equal Futures Partnership, the United States has made an extraordinary range of commitments, building upon existing efforts to help women and girls around the world. There's many different areas, but a few that are, I think, especially relevant to what we are discussing today are opening doors to quality education and career opportunities in science, technology, engineering, and math fields for women, promoting civic education and public leadership for girls and women, ensuring economic security for survivors of violence, strengthening support for women entrepreneurs, and also calling upon U.S. businesses, academic institutions, and nonprofit organizations to make commitments to advance women and girls' economic and political empowerment at home and abroad. It's really, truly been an honor to serve in this position as a U.S. youth delegate at a time when foreign policy has really shifted towards recognizing the importance of engaging women and girls around the world in development. And as I mentioned earlier, recognizing that a society cannot develop and hope for a prosperous future without engaging half its population. And I think this event here today is a testament to the energy and dedication that comes forth when women and girls are engaged in a variety of different sectors. And it's really truly been an honor to be here with you all today. And I would, of course, be happy to engage with any of you in my role at the UN in whatever capacity that you wish. And so this is some information about the program. And also, those of you that have young women in your lives, encourage them to apply to be the next youth delegate when the application comes out from the State Department in August of this year. Thank you.